What is global software engineering? Globally distributed software engineering deals with software engineering on multiple locations. The aspect globally refers to multiple time zones or continents. If you take it literally, it's all about software engineering on several locations with people working jointly together but distributed all around the world. So if you, let's say, comprise it into a formal definition, you would get something like the discipline of design, implementation and validation of software products and/or components on at least 2 geographic locations and at least 2 continents. That's a formal definition. The essence of global software engineering is that engineers are working on 2 locations, far away from each other, making collaboration more difficult. That brings us to the work of Carmel and Agarwal, who in 2001 in IEEE Software published a paper on adding distance to software engineering. They showed us that if you add the factor of distance to software engineering, you get 3 negative impacts, and these also influence each other. The first negative impact is on communication. If you put distance into software engineering, people communicate more difficult. But this also has an impact on coordination. If you can't see each other and be far apart, it's much more difficult to coordinate the work. And the third consequence is that the more distance you put into software engineering, the harder it is to be in control. Because you don't understand exactly where others are, you don't know exactly what's happening around you. So the feeling of being out of control is much larger. And it all comes from adding distance to software engineering. But what is distance? When we talk about distance, we often think about the amount of kilometers. When you talk about geographical distance, you mean the distance between person A and person B. Most of the times people express distance in kilometers or miles. But in a more practical way of working, it's not so much the distance in kilometers, but it's the travel time. How long does it take for us to meet each other? So thousands of kilometers in some cases might be an hour flying, but in other cases 1,000 kilometers might be a 5-hour drive. I think that when we consider geographical distance, we should look at the time it takes to really meet each other. The second dimension of distance is temporal distance. It's the time zone distance. So if you travel from north to south, the time zone stays the same. But if you travel from west to east, the time zone starts to move. The consequence is that the amount of overlapping hours between 2 sides decreases. And if the distance is even longer, you might even get into the situation where 2 people never work at the same time. When one of them is working, the other one is sleeping. So then it's even impossible to communicate, with the effect that it's really hard to coordinate the work and be in control. Research has learned that the shorter this overlapping window, the convergence window is, the more difficult it becomes to work together. The third dimension of distance is the language distance. Don't underestimate the distance between native and non-native speakers. Go for example to London and speak with a native Englishman. You will find out that it's harder to have a discussion than when 2 non-native speakers talk with each other. The fourth type of distance is the cultural distance. We will also address this later in the course. People from different cultures have different norms. Their values differ. And what one considers to be good in one country may not be good in another one. For example, some countries find politeness more important than being honest, while other countries think that honesty is more important than being polite. If you don't know this, and you don't keep an eye on this, you might get into problems and make it harder for yourself and for the people you work with. So, summarizing. Bringing distance into software engineering really makes it harder. The communication, the coordination and the control are more difficult. Because of this, globally distributed software engineering is also a broad field of research. It's about distributed software engineering, where software engineers are not in the same location. But it also involves technological support, enabling tools. What can we do to give them the feeling that they are close together? And how can we use this technology? A third dimension is globalization. I mean the fact that we are living in a global world. Travel is more easy and cheap, and this has an impact on the easiness of working worldwide. Cross-cultural communication is another way to look at it. And finally, there's the dimension of virtual teams, a research area which is really useful for global software engineering. So, GDSE is actually a broad field. It looks at the impacts of adding distance into software engineering, but it also has a people dimension. It's about trust, it's about communication, education, culture. It has a management dimension. What are our business drivers? Why do we work globally? How do we organize the work? How does our workflow look like? It furthermore is an engineering dimension. It focuses on technology. It focuses on specific tools and the application of these tools. So, globally distributed software engineering may at first only look as adding distance to software engineering. But if you open up the topic, you will learn that there's much more. And you will learn that it's a huge and challenging environment where much is happening and where many challenges exist. And finally, where many research opportunities are waiting to be explored.